The final administrative tool that we want to look at here is known as Windows PowerShell. Windows PowerShell is a command line administrative tool that's used by IT professionals and has been being used since its inception, which was back in Windows Vista. PowerShell is a command line instead of a GUI, and so that means that we're going to be entering in numerous commands in order to configure local and remote systems. And one of the big benefits of PowerShell is the level of automation that it provides. Automation is simply handling the same task in a repeated fashion and doing it, so that you don't have to follow a bunch of steps every time, but you can just fire off a PowerShell function or a script in order to achieve that task. And so in an enterprise environment, even medium to large size businesses, this can be very advantageous. Let's start with some of the features of PowerShell. It does support virtually all automation needs through flexible one-liners and full scripting capabilities. A one-liner is essentially multiple PowerShell commands that are strung together using the pipe character. And so essentially I can get, say, a list of events from the event logs, and then I can filter those events to just particular ones that I want, and then I can sort them all in a particular arrangement. That would be 3 separate commands, but it would be a one line. Right. And you can also create PS1 files. They're just text files, but they're using the PowerShell language and the commandlets to create very complex scripts. You can access and manage virtually every area of the operating system and its applications. The local file stores, the services, the processes, the events, your disk, your network, on and on and on we could go. The level of control that PowerShell gives you is really unmatched. You can even get into the local registry, the local certificate store. You can browse through the contents of Active Directory or sort through the contents using Windows PowerShell. And so another feature is that with the commands, which are referred to as commandlets, you have a common syntax. First, let's deal with that name, commandlet. Sometimes I'll just say PowerShell command. Other times I'll say commandlet. Commandlet's a made-up word, but it's a word that Microsoft made up to distinguish PowerShell commands from other commands, from normal executables. So we use the term commandlet, and all the commandlets use the same type of syntax, which is a verb-noun syntax, like get-process. We'll see this more here as we go along. And as I said, you can do local administration, and remote administration is built in. That's been built in since Windows PowerShell 2.0. PowerShell 2.0 was introduced with Windows 7, and so now we are technically at PowerShell version 5.0 that is shipping with Windows 10. One of the biggest problems with a command line interface is simply the learning curve. And it's a whole lot easier to teach you how to point and click and drag, go to the right administrative tool and find the specific configuration option that you want. It's more difficult to teach the commands that are going to be required to make those configuration changes in the command line. Okay. And so, that's where the syntax is really, really important. And the nice thing is that, as we just said, all of the commandlets in PowerShell will use the same syntax. Doesn't mean the commands are exactly the same. That doesn't mean you don't have any differences in, say, the parameters, but they all follow the exact same syntax. And that's very helpful, and that syntax is verb-nouns. We have a, for instance here, get-service. The verb is get, service is the noun, and then it will always be followed by, or mostly be followed by, parameters. Most commandlets will have a parameter, and the syntax there is dash, the name of a parameter, space, and then the actual value. Okay? You need quotes around the values if they have spaces. If they don't have spaces, then you technically don't need quotes. You can use single quotes or double quotes. You just don't want to mix and match. There is a difference, but we really have to get into scripting before we understand the difference. And so when in doubt, I would use double quotes. some common verbs that we're going to just need to be aware of. These can help you. Microsoft does like to ask these kinds of questions on the exam. They are full board on Windows PowerShell and have been really since it came out. Okay, it was fairly limited up to really, in my opinion, Windows 8 and 2012 as to what it could do. But when we had PowerShell 3 and Windows 8, the floodgates were open, and you really could access just about anything via Windows PowerShell. A case in point would be all of the TCP/IP utilities like ipconfig, traceroute, ping, NSLOOKUP, a DNS name resolution utility. They all have PowerShell equivalents now. They didn't at first, they didn't in versions 1 and 2, but in version 3, they do. Okay? You can completely access, format, assign drive letters for all of your disks. If you're doing anything with iSCSI, that can be done in its entirety. Hyper-V has a module, a collection of commandlets that includes 183 commands on Windows Server 2012. So it just continues to go and go and go. They've really bought into this idea, and I don't think PowerShell's going away. So I frequently say this in courses: if you are a Windows admin or you have any desire to be a Windows admin, you've got to learn PowerShell. Doesn't mean you have to be a full-blown PowerShell scripting guru, but you got to be able to write a simple command. You've got to be able to find help on a command, because this stuff will pop up on the exams. All right. So common verbs, back to that. Get is one of the most common verbs. It retrieves a set of objects. So it's get, dash, and then whatever the noun is. You want services, it's get service. Process, get process. Event logs, get event log. Something in Active Directory, it's going to be get AD user, computer, group, whatever object it happens to be that you want. Set, on the other hand, is going to actually modify objects. When you run a get statement, you usually don't have to have any parameters. It'll just get you the whole list if you want. But when you run a set statement, you have to tell it what you want to modify. So you have to specify the object, and that's done with different parameters depending on the actual commandlet. New, not technically a verb, but that is the word that they've used for all commandlets that create something. In general, PowerShell administration of a Windows 10 machine, you're probably not going to be using new that often. I guess maybe one exception would be adding items into the registry via PowerShell. You use the new item commandlet. But new gets frequently used when we're talking about group policy administration, Hyper-V, virtual machine administration, Active Directory administration, and those kinds of things. Enable, turn something on. Disable, turn something off. Remove, deletes an object. I don't have that one in the list, but that's another common one. Stop and start for processes or services, or even the computer. Stop computer is the commandlet that we would use to shut down a system, either locally or remotely. So those are some of the common verbs that we're going to see. The Windows PowerShell interface is built right into Windows 10. It can be used to access a number of different components. Commandlets we've already described. Those are built in. Some commandlets are not added until you add certain administrative tools. Okay, so for instance, on a Windows 10 machine, I wouldn't have access to any of the group policy commands or the Active Directory commands unless I loaded the remote server admin tools. So you got a base set of commands, which includes thousands of commandlets, but it's still a base set. And you start getting into some of the server components and Hyper-V and stuff, it's not going to be loaded until you load those administrative tools. You can also access scripts. Scripts are simply PowerShell commands put together to perform a particular function and saved in a text file given a PS1 extension. Unlike EXEs, unlike VBS scripts, Visual Basic scripts, you don't have a scripting engine that is self-executing. In other words, you cannot double-click a PowerShell file. Okay? You can right-click and say you want to run in PowerShell now, but you can't just double-click it. So you'd either have to open up PowerShell and then call the name of the script, and then it would run, or you can right-click and say you want to open it in PowerShell. You can also access variables. Variables are used to store store items, store objects. So for instance, I could use get service and just display a list of the services, or I could say, dollar services equals get service, and then it would populate that variable dollar services with the contents. We'll see that. That's a little bit easier to see than to talk about. You can also access command line programs. So frequently you'll see me pulling the ipconfig or a ping or something like that within the PowerShell window. So technically any command line programs, including the old DOS command line programs of directory, dir, change directory, make directory, clear screen, those all do work in Windows PowerShell. And we also have aliases. And in reality, those last few that I just mentioned, they're actually working because they've created an alias. So an alias is, this is what I'd like to type in, and this is what it maps to. So they've created some transitional aliases to make it easy for those that might have experience in the DOS command prompt or in the CMD command prompt that's been included in Windows for years. They've provided some options to be able to utilize those. And then you have access to help. And there's an infinite amount of help. I know we briefly saw that before as we were just looking at how to join a computer to a domain. But help is right there at your fingertips. You can just type in the word help and then space and then the name of the commandlet. All right, so let's open up PowerShell. We're just going to start here with an introduction to PowerShell. We'll open up the administrative version so I don't have any problems. I'm just going to show you real quick. And by the way, we don't need to go into detailed. We're not going to spend a ton of time here, but as I said, it's important that we at least know something, and then as you move along, you'll get to know more and more and more. And so I always like to start out with this introduction just to try to make sure everybody's on the same page, okay? If you want more information, there are courses on PowerShell. So, but we can go to properties here, and the reason I like to do this is just to show you, you can change the fonts. And so if you just like it to be a bigger font, that's fine. Just hit OK. Oops, there we go. Okay, that made the change, but that was an odd error message. If it starts to take up too much of the screen, like you're getting scrolling here, that's not very good. So we go back into properties, go to layout, just make sure that the screen buffer size and the window size are the same. And you actually want to match the buffer to the window size. Okay? And the reason you want to do that is because it will get rid of that scrolling. Right? The buffer is the memory, how many characters it's capable of displaying, but then your window is sized another way, and so if your buffer is higher than your window, then you get that scrolling. Okay, so here's PowerShell. This is what it looks like. Again, we can just type in commands. Let's start with the command get process. Okay, if I type the command get process, it's just going to, and hit enter, it's going to show me a list of the processes on my system. Okay, now real quick, I'm going to show you something that's really cool and very helpful. If get PRO and then I hit the tab key, and that's going to fill in the rest of that commandlet. That is called tab completion. So you have tab completion of commandlets and you have tab completion of parameters. And think about how much time that saves you, number one. And number two, think about how that's helpful if I don't actually know the name of parameters. So I go dash and just start hitting tab, and then I can cycle through the various parameters. Now, that's not necessarily the best way of doing it. If you know the name of the parameter, then at least start typing it, because here I'm getting a bunch of system variables and things like that, okay? So we say get process, and we could say the specific computer name, localhost. Oh, that didn't map correctly. That's supposed to go to my 127.0.0.1, but get process. If you don't specify a computer name, it's just going to do the local computer anyway. If you specify a computer name, as long as remote management WinRM is turned on, you'll be able to get that information from a remote machine. Let's try a different one, get service. Okay, gets me a whole list of services. And we can notice the status, the name, the display name. These are attributes. Each one of these things is called an object, and these are attributes. So let's use that, and let's take this a little bit further. We're going to say we want to, up arrow repeats the last command. I want to get service, but then I want to pipe. Okay, so when I pipe, it's going to say, it's going to take the contents and instead of displaying them, it's going to feed them into another command. And that other command, I'm just going to say, I want to only see those things where the status is equal to running, okay? And if you are familiar with previous versions of PowerShell, you notice a difference here in PowerShell 5. We've got a lot of color coding going on. That didn't happen even in 4. That's a new thing here that we've got. And that is helpful because it just distinguishes the different parts. These are commands. The only reason I have where there, that's technically the where object commandlet. Okay, but you can shorten it to where. $_ represents, that's a system variable that represents each of these objects coming through the pipe. So it's looking at the status attribute of each object, and the only way it's going to display to me is if it's equal to running. So we hit enter, and now we got a list of services, but we've only got the running services. Okay? If you want to see all of the attributes that are available to you, let's get the VMM service. We would say get service, VMMS, hit enter. But then instead of just hitting enter, we want to pipe that into a format list. Okay, and if you pipe it into format list, it's going to show you all of the attributes. So for instance, you might want to see the service type, or you might want to see what services are dependent upon it. Okay, so those are some different things that you can do. Let's grab one from the event log, show you a little bit more of a command. So get event log. Log name is application. Entry type, we only want warnings. And then I want to see the newest 10. So it displays for me the latest 10 warning events in the event logs. Okay? You can take off the entry type if you want. Just show me the last 50 entries. Okay? We'll do that because there we got some errors and we've got some information and we've got some warnings. And so let's now take and let's sort that a little bit. We're going to sort object, and I want to sort object by entry type. And I want to do it in descending order. Okay? And so now I've got information, then warning, then error. All right? Ascending order would have clearly just been the other way around, but then that can give you some different things. Now, what you might want to do is you might want to do a filter here. Okay, so I want to just see these things that are related to, looks like a search indexer, synchronization. And so I say, okay, let's go where $_ dot, and I believe that's the source is equal to ESENT. Pipe again. There we go. Okay, and now I'm only seeing the errors for this source. It seemed to have a lot of errors, but I can see now that these have all occurred, you know, within I don't know, about a 10-minute period of time there, it looks like. So it's something I would probably want to try to investigate and look at. But that's a good example of a one-liner. This is one command, here's a second command, and then there's a third command, right? And so it's given me the information that I need. If you want to see additional commands, get modules. There are going to be a list of modules there, show you what you want. If you want, let me see, actually, get module and then list available. These are the available modules that you have. So there's a bunch of them that may not be available to you automatically. So AppLocker and BitLocker and DNS client and DNS server. And so that's a good way to just see all of them. There's the Hyper-V module. If you want to then see all the commands, you can go get command. But if you do that, that list is going to go on forever. So what you do is say get command module Hyper-V, you know, and it'll display all of the commandlets in the Hyper-V module, which, as I said in this one, it's almost near 200 of them. Okay, do the same thing. We'll say, give me those in the DNS client module. Whoops, actually, let me scroll back up here. We'll find that DNS client, you know, and it might be, you might run into one where you have to import. So if you do have modules, oh no, that actually has nothing to do with it. There's not enough space on the disk. So this has given me some error. So that command should work, get command, here's the module. I want to display all of the entries from that command. We're having a disk space issue that I'm going to have to get fixed. If you want help, just help on a particular command. So let's say help on clear DNS client cache. Okay. You can just type in help and it'll show you the help. As we saw before, you may need to update that. And it looks like I was on a different machine when I did the update help, or it's not working because of the disk space issue. So help, clear the name of the command, and it'll show you the name, it'll show you the syntax of the command. You can use dash examples if you want to see the examples. I know we saw that before. Dash full or detailed, dash detailed, that'll show you a bunch of additional information, all right? Get alias. All right, and we're actually seeing the same message here that there's not enough space on the disk, so I was thinking I could continue, but this is going to end up affecting us. So this is going to be a situation that I have to just go fix here, and then we'll come back and we can continue on looking at help and some other things about PowerShell.